Coming up on Mississippi Roads, we visit the old John Ford home. We talk with volunteers bringing the lost cemetery back to life and take a walk through the Trail of Honor. All that coming up now on Mississippi Roads.
Down Mississippi Road. Mississippi Road.
Hi, welcome to Mississippi Roads. I'm your host, Walt Grayson. This week, we're coming to you from a beautiful and historic spot. We're coming to you from War Memorial Park in Pass Christian, or as the folks around here call it, the City Park. Now, beautiful because I'm sitting there looking right across Highway 90, the Gulf of Mexico. And historic because these homes surrounding this park survived both Hurricane Camille and Hurricane Katrina. And their history goes back even farther than that because this is like the center of old Pass Christian, which back from the mid-1850s on was the Riviera of the Southland. Folks from New Orleans would come over here to vacation, to get away from the city, and to enjoy the Gulf breezes coming in off the Mississippi Sound out in front of us here. Now, the Pass Christian Historical Society maintains the integrity of these homes surrounding the park here. But believe it or not, there's an even older home, one of the oldest homes in the state of Mississippi, about 100 miles north of here, that gave birth to the Historical Society up in Marion County. Let's take a look. At the turn of the 19th century, there were settled areas in the state, Natchez to the southwest and spots along the Mississippi River primarily. But the interior of the Mississippi Territory was still largely untamed, but was slowly being opened for settlement. Now, around 1800, Mississippi was the frontier of the United States, although we weren't a state yet. Spain still claimed the territory to the south, and France was across the Mississippi River, so if you wanted to go out west back then, this is where you came. So a fellow from the Carolinas, a Methodist minister by the name of John Ford, brought his family to what is today Marion County and found his spot not too far from the Pearl River and built this, what we call the John Ford home today. This house would be the other antebellum. Now, we think of the palatial mansions on the plantations when we hear antebellum home, but any structure built before the Civil War was antebellum. And there were way more of these type buildings in Mississippi back then than the mansions. History seemed to find the Fords in their new home the first decade they lived here.
The first year they had the rebellion of West Florida in 1810 that they were right here by. The next year had the New Madrid earthquakes in 1811. Of course, 1812, they had the war with Britain started. 1813, they had the massacre over here at Fort Mims, Alabama, where all the settlers were killed. They built a stockade around the house at that point. 1814, Andrew Jackson's coming back to fight the British. He stays at the house on November the 27th of 1814. The next year, the Pearl River Convention happens here at the house where they petition Congress to create the state of Mississippi. The next year, Mississippi is the 20th state in the Union. And then 1818, they have the Mississippi Methodist Conventions here. And so it was just a history packed with all kind of events.
Andrew Jackson's room is pretty much unchanged from the way it was when he stayed here, with the exception his picture wasn't on the wall then. They called this the Presidential Suite, although Jackson was still a decade and a half away from his presidency. Rachel Baker's a tour guide in the house and says the general and future president was allowed to stay indoors only on certain terms.
Mrs. Ford said that there was a couple of things he couldn't do. He couldn't cuss, and he couldn't drink, and he had to attend the family prayer meetings every night.
Well, he didn't, and he did. Other notables no doubt visited, or at least passed by, back in the day. There was another future president that roamed around this part of the country quite a bit back then.
This house was a landmark early on in this region. The main roads that ran through here all ran within close proximity of this house. We have it on a document. There was a young lieutenant colonel named Zachary Taylor, was in the Fordsville neighborhood at that time. So there's no doubt that all these famous people would have seen this house as they passed through here back in the day.
But what's more important about the John Ford home is not who saw it back then, but what we get to see here today.
It's the oldest frontier-style home in the state of Mississippi. It's said to be the only one that has not been remodeled or restored. It has been kept just in its original condition, which makes it extremely unique.
The timbers used to build this house were carved from the Pearl River swamps, virgin pine and cypress. Some of the sills, running the entire length of the house, are hewn from single trees. The bricks were fired on site. Down below the main dwelling are the kitchen and dining areas. Most of the furniture here is original to the house. Up above is the living room and the bedrooms. And again, most of the furniture in these rooms is original to the house. And way up above is a spacious attic. And the reason the house has so much of the original furniture was, as pieces were replaced over the years, the old pieces weren't thrown away, but were put here in the attic. So as the house was being put back in the condition it was originally, pieces from the attic were pulled out and put back in rooms where they used to be. The John Ford home stayed in one family from the time it was built until the time it was sold in the 1960s. During that time, other colorful members of the community lived here. The post office in the front room is a reminder of one of them. Willie Rankin was a Ford descendant. He was a rural mail carrier. His distinction? He weighed 467 pounds, making him the largest rural mail carrier in the United States. One more distinction derived from the John Ford home. In the 1960s, when it became known the descendant living in the house at that time wanted to sell it, afraid history may be lost in the process, a group of people banded together and purchased the John Ford home with the idea of preserving it for us. That band of people became the Marion County Historical Society, and they have a museum in downtown Columbia as well as maintaining and giving tours of the John Ford home. And the home is the reason for the Historical Society's coming into being. It is the other antebellum, the best example of a pioneer dwelling in the Pearl River Valley, one acquainted with the hard-scrabble life of the frontier, preserved so we can see how the working folks lived 200 years ago, when the state wasn't even a state, and way before everything changed so much. You find a lot of amenities in this park. There's a playground in here. There's lots of walking trails, exercise areas. There's a gazebo up front. Lots of oak trees. You'll also find unique tree sculptures that have been carved by Marlin Miller, like the one that's back behind me here. This one is dedicated to Colonel Lawrence Roberts. Colonel Roberts was a Tuskegee Airman back during the Second World War. He's also the father of famous newscaster Robin Roberts. She's from Pass Christian. So in this park, the trees are the monuments. In our next story, the trees were hiding the monuments. Let's go to Golden West Cemetery and see how it's being taken back from the trees in Port Gibson. Let's start with a quick overview of Port Gibson, just in case you're not familiar with it or maybe have forgotten. Port Gibson's in southwest Mississippi in Claiborne County, and it's one of the oldest towns in the state. It survived being burned in the Civil War even after the Union victory in the Battle of Port Gibson, supposedly because General Grant said it was just too beautiful to burn. Well, he may have said it, he may not, but it wasn't burned. This church was here at that time, the Port Gibson Presbyterian Church, with its iconic hand pointing toward heaven atop the steeple. So was St. Joseph Catholic Church with its cobalt blue windows. Nearby is the Catholic cemetery associated with the church. Resin Bowie's buried here. They say Resin Bowie actually invented the Bowie knife, made famous by his better-known brother, Jim Bowie. The Catholic cemetery is one of 4 historic cemeteries in Claiborne County, along with the Jewish cemetery just around the corner from the Catholic cemetery. and Winter Green Cemetery, where some Confederate soldiers who died in the Battle of Port Gibson are buried, along with a couple of Union troops in Soldiers Row. And a history book full of early townspeople and their markers are scattered over the rest of the acres. And then the fourth historic cemetery in Claiborne County is this one, Golden West Cemetery, on the western edge of Port Gibson, where the town climbs into the bluffs.
And basically, it's one of the only historically black cemeteries.
This is the cemetery I said was coming back to life. Actually, it's slowly being extracted from trees and underbrush that had engulfed it over the past quarter century since it sort of fell out of use. Heading up the cleanup effort is Pastor William Coleman. He was introduced to the project by the fellow I guess you could call the Port Gibson town historian, Al Hollingsworth.
Then he asked me to come out and look at it. And I told a story how I took that bait and bit the hook, and I've been hooked ever since. I can't get off of it.
This cemetery is one of the few items listed on the Department of Interior's map of the United States. On one side, it lists African American and Native American sites. On the other side is Civil War sites. And Golden West Cemetery is listed there. And it was because of the uniqueness of the cemetery and the headstones and the fact that it does go back, you know. Clearly, it was part of the very early movement of the freedmen, you know, when after the Civil War, they had to have a burial place. And I'm not sure who started, who had the original deed, where the land came from. But here it is, and there's a lot of history here.
A lot of history that had become completely covered in mimosa and ligustrum and oak and bodock until, as he put it, Pastor Coleman took the bait and ran with it and started a cleanup drive to bring that history back into the light and to give dignity back to Golden West Cemetery in Port Gibson.
We have actually spent over a year just cutting the trees out of here on the weekends, and whenever that process took over a year. I've had help with my family, Lorraine Hunt and Robert Hunt and my sister Clara and just my immediate family. We started out, but then as it went on, we ended up getting a lot of help from some individuals that came in, and then one of the biggest ones is AmeriCorps. AmeriCorps came in, and once they found out about the project, they have been here like 4 times. And that is what has really helped us to get to the point where we are now.
Now, the practicality of the cleanup is to restore a landmark in the community. But cemeteries have a meaning beyond the practical and beyond just this one cemetery, and attract many people to join in projects like this cleanup for reasons of their own. Jessica Crawford is one of those individuals. Although professionally she is the Southeast Regional Director of the Archaeological Conservancy and has a keen interest in the well-being of Golden West Cemetery, her participation is more of a personal thing.
I'm here just because of interest. This is an opportunity I really couldn't pass up because I'm interested in old cemeteries, historic cemeteries, and this is such a neglected, or has been such a neglected cemetery, that this is a great opportunity to really make a difference, and you can see a difference being made. So I'm just here as a volunteer. I've kind of got the cemetery fever here. You become interested in the motifs on the different types of headstones, or you read a little bit of something on a headstone about someone, and it makes me want to go back home and look something up, find out more about them. And I find comfort in them also, that it's because I've lost people that I love, and it's sort of, but I'm not the only one, and it's just they're comforting places to me.
As the forest is cut back and the headstones emerge, the cemetery does start to become not just a mass of graves, but a community of individuals.
I have a number of people, and I can name 2 or 3. One lady, Miss Sadie Appleton. She said, "Mr. Coleman, my mom is buried right out here, and we haven't been able to get to it. And the last time we tried to get to it, there was a snake in the tree, and we left and haven't come back." And she showed me where it was, and we came in and just cut a path. First time she put a set of yellow roses on her mom's grave. And she's an elderly lady and sweetest lady you want to see. And she came out and she said, that's what's going on. And with her, and then there's others, there's another lady, Miss Humphreys, and she's the latest one. She had a brother by the name of Talbot. And she said, he's up on that hill someplace. And I kind of just told her, said, Miss Humphreys, if he's up there, we'll find him if he's there. And that's when you run out of gas and somebody comes and says something like that, that just lifts you up even more.
Speaking of running out of gas, this'll do it to you. All last summer and on into the winter, the cleaning crews, sometimes large, sometimes small, sometimes just William by himself, cut and stacked and hauled and had the trees beat back from the bottom of the bluff eventually all the way to the top. And then summer came back, and this happened. It looks about as overgrown now as it was when they started. It's enough to take the wind out of your sails.
Somewhat. Sunshine hasn't touched this ground in 25 years. And once we cleared out the trees, everything grows. It's the fool in me. I don't know what you want to call it, but I just cannot, I can't let this just go.
Little things keep you jump-started. Little pieces of history you find.
About 30 military from all ranks. One particular person served in 3 wars.
Then there's a realization that life is coming back to the dead, or coming back to visit the dead anyway, because they can get in here again.
And just since we've been doing this work, there are so many flowers that people have come out and just did because they can get to it.
There's also the philosophical aspect of digging this history out of the underbrush where it can be seen and celebrated again.
How do you go forward if you don't know where you came from, if you don't know how it was? And they have a tendency to say, if you don't learn from history, you're going to repeat it.
History sets the trajectory for the future. There's no place to go if you have nothing to aim for. But you see these people and their markers and the love with which they were buried, and read their lives, and the few words on their markers are in the symbols, and the past is set. From here, you go into the future. And therefore, bringing this cemetery back can bring back direction and hope.
It needs to live again.
Cemeteries have never been a place for the dead. They've always been for the living, a place for us to bury our dead and remember them and revere them. And a reminder for us to live our lives conscious of the inevitability that someday we will be joining them. This beautiful park that we've been visiting in today, War Memorial Park in Pass Christian, was organized about 1945 as a tribute to the people in this part of the country who served in World War II. Now today, there are also monuments in here to hurricane victims, to volunteers who come into this part of the country to help out, as well as monuments to veterans. We're going to take a walk through the Trail of Honor for our last story. Trail of Honor is probably one of the most unique ways to honor veterans that Mississippi's come up with. This is a depiction of every conflict that this nation has been involved in since the French and Indian War all the way through the conflict in the Middle East right now.
We have spread from coast to coast. People have come through here from all over the country and seen this event, and we've gotten so many people that they put it on their calendar every year, and this is their vacation. They come in to see this event and reconnect with people. We're at the Harley-Davidson of Jackson, Mississippi. It is a Harley-Davidson dealership up until the Thursday before the event, and it turns into the Trail of Honor. Showroom's completely gutted. The registers are shut down. We don't sell parts. It's complete Trail of Honor for a full week before it opens back up. The whole event is all about paying tribute to our American veterans, past, present, and those that will be future veterans. It's an educational event. We encourage everybody to bring your kids out, bring your grandchildren out, let them learn about history from living, breathing historians, and see see a little bit of why we are able to enjoy the freedoms that we have.
Well, in my humble opinion, we're losing our history. And this is a place where if you will come and take part in this function and go through the Trail of Honor, you will again realize, or maybe for the first time realize, hey, our history is important. And this is a great place to learn a tremendous amount about our history.
I served for 24 years. I retired in 2011. I'm a veteran of Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and Iraq. I've been involved with the trail in one way or another since its inception. My position is to coordinate all of the moving pieces, to make sure that we've got choppers in place where they need to be, and just make sure that we've got everything set up and ready to take care of our guests that are coming in and our reenactors and all of our volunteers. This whole event is put on by complete volunteer staff. You'll enter the showroom and we'll have our VIPs there. We've got Tuskegee Airmen, Medal of Honor recipients, Navy Cross recipients, former POWs, Iwo Jima survivors, Pearl Harbor survivors. We've got some of our country's greatest heroes that come into this event every year. Those are the people you will meet in the showroom. People that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet some of these people and hear their stories. Once you've listened to some of those stories from our heroes, then you go out the back of the showroom and the trail starts, and you go through time from the French Indian War to current operations, and you see how things progressed, how the soldiers lived, how they were supported, and see how things have changed, the equipment's changed, and hear what it was like to live and fight for this country during those times.
To carry in the field, to be comfortable, to be accurate, and I can shoot doves by putting dove shot in it, squirrels, rabbits, turkeys, deer, all the way up to bear.
We've got 200 to 250 reenactors most years. They don't come in and say, okay, I think I want to do this or I want to do that. They do that same reenactment wherever they go in the country. So they are living, breathing historians that as you're talking to them, somebody from the French Indian War, you think they were there over 200 years ago. They know the ins and outs. They know everything about those conflicts. So it's a history lesson that you walk through. You'll go through the Civil War battery. You'll get into the hedgerows in World War II and Korea. And then you move into the Vietnam era.
LT, you got a kid. Get over here. You've been way too close to my man.
And then you walk into a clearing and you see this somber black wall with these white etched names of over 58,000 of our brothers and sisters that never came home. And that's the one area on the trail that it's silent. There's nobody talking. They're walking, they're looking. It literally takes your breath away. And the importance of having the Vietnam Traveler Memorial Wall here on the site is that there's so many Vietnam veterans that they'd never get a chance to go to Washington, D.C. and see the actual monument. So they come here and they're able to go to that panel and they reflect on the times, the memories of an individual that paid the ultimate cost for our freedom. We've had Vietnam veterans during our Vietnam reenactment that come out of the woods and they're pale as a ghost. They're white. You can see they're visibly shaken. And we ask them, what do we need to change? And they say, don't change anything. I couldn't stay down there and watch it because it was too real. Keep doing what you're doing because people need to know what we went through.
Well, that's about all the time we have for this show. If you'd like information about anything you've seen, contact us at mpbonline.org/Mississippi Roads or like our Mississippi Public Broadcasting Facebook page. Until next time, I'm Walt Grayson. I'll be seeing you on Mississippi Roads.
Mississippi Roads is made possible in part by the generous support of viewers like you. Thank you.